You're not even halfway into the school year and already it's just not working out for you or your child. It's okay, Mama. Take a deep breath and know you have other options. I get it. I too didn't think there were other options for my family either. But after chatting with Shelley Ross with locally owned Closet Concepts here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, she is the one who initially helped me realize Hubby and I have other options for our 3-year-old when it comes to her education. So we just started dipping our toes into the water and exploring all of our education options. I'm looking at Lutheran schools, Catholic schools, Christian schools, public schools. Last episode, I just had a guest on to explore homeschooling. Told you, looking into all the options. Shelley knew I was on this fact-finding mission, so she introduced me to Katie Slee, the Director of Advancement at Bishop Dwenger, just so I could start to gather all the facts. I know location and finances are always factors when it comes to the education of our kids, but they don't have to be, especially with the recent expansion of Indiana's Choice Scholarship Program. If you are trying to move your child or explore an alternative, Katie is a great resource when it comes to a Catholic school option. The deep dive into education continues right now here on the News Mom Podcast.
She mops the floor while mopping up D.C. This is News Mom.
Shelley, Katie, I'm so excited to bring you both here. You know, I've been wanting to bring you in on the News Mom Podcast for a while now. But before we really dive into private education for our kids, particularly a Catholic education for our kids, Shelley, I want to spend some time just talking directly to you because at the end of the day, you're the reason why my personal fact-finding mission when it comes to education has spiraled into what it's spiraled into. So I blame you, just so you know. But truly, I think it was maybe 6 months ago at this time?
Yeah.
You and your husband, John, you own Closet Concepts here in Fort Wayne. It's a locally owned business.
Yep, small business.
Which you all know, I'm a proud supporter of my small business friends. If you have any organization needs, your pantry, your closet, your garage, call them, Closet Concepts. But you were at my house taking some measurements for our, I believe it was our pantry.
Yes.
In a workout room, right?
Yeah. Correct.
So you're at my home and you're like, oh, well, what made you move? Because we had just moved a couple of months prior to you being there. And I told you at the time, the main reason for my husband and I moving was so we could be in a different school district. Mm-hmm. And you and I just got to talking like moms do, just really organic conversation about how frustrating it can be to feel like we don't really have a lot of options. And what's interesting, I think, about you is the story that you told me about your kids attending Catholic school here in Fort Wayne, but you yourself didn't grow up a Catholic.
I did not. I converted 2 years after my husband and I got married. And it's been a journey. It's been a long journey. John and I, the same thing. When we moved back to Fort Wayne from Indianapolis, we plunked ourselves in Homestead School District because we knew that we were going to raise a family and we wanted to be in a good school district. So we did that. And then kind of the same thing. My neighbor was Catholic and taught in Catholic schools. And so then it's like, well, maybe we should think about it. And coming to learn, you know, it's like, okay, well, we'll try it for elementary. And then we'll see come junior high, you know, maybe we'll switch over to Woodside or, you know, something like that. And the journey, and I really do feel like the Lord just kept like leading us down this path and increased my faith at the time as well, because you become friends with people who have strong faith, and it's a support community. The schools really embrace parents being involved in the classroom, which again, you just felt like you were in this really supportive community.
Mm-hmm. Like a partnership.
A partnership, yeah. And then even when it came to high school, then it was like, okay, are we going to decide between, you know, public, you know, private, and luckily we have 2 great options in Catholic schools here in Fort Wayne. I always say that we're blessed to have 2 Catholic high schools, you know, that can reach a ton of people. And, you know, it just basically came down to, for us choosing Bishop Dwenger was kind of selfish because our business is so close to Bishop Dwenger.
Hey, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and, you know, there's little like insights that you realize after your kids have been through school. So my husband would take them to high school, but we live way south. So he had captured 25, 30 minutes in the car with them every single morning. And the same thing with me, if I would pick them up, I'd have captured time with them in the afternoons for 25, 30 minutes in the afternoon. Hey, how was your day? You know, what's going on at school? how are your relationships? How are your friends, and stuff. So it's just been a really good thing to me. I think it's us as Catholic moms, and Katie knows this, you do kind of feel like your kid's in a little bit of a bubble being in Catholic schools, but in this world today, I kind of don't mind the bubble. I kind of really like it. And my kids are all done now, and we're empty nesters, but feel like we've been truly blessed by Catholic schools. And I just want to let people know that there is another option out there. Not that public school is a bad option. I have great Catholic friends who sent their kids to Homestead, and they had a great experience. And I think you just got to find out what's right for your family, and just know that there are other options out there if your family needs that.
That's the key, right? Doing what's right for your family. Like, I think at the end of the day, all of us can agree, we all have that same mission. That's all our heartbeats, right? We want to do what's best for our family, whether that's a private school, a public school, micro schooling, homeschooling, whatever that may be.
Right.
We're all going into it with the best intentions for our kids. I'm sitting here looking at you telling this story, and I've heard you tell this story before about your kids and how God kind of led you down this path. But I never did ask you this, since you didn't go, obviously, to a Catholic school growing up yourself.
I did not.
You converted shortly after marrying your husband. Did you have any reservations about sending your kids to Catholic schools? Because this is where I'm going to bring Katie into the conversation, too, because I feel like, no offense, Katie, but there's a lot of myths and stereotypes out there about not just Catholic schools, but private schools in general. Did you have any of those, Shelley, going into it?
Oh, absolutely. Even in just my process of becoming Catholic, my family was very against me becoming Catholic, particularly my mom, which I get, the Catholic Church is not perfect. And for anyone to sit there and think that the Catholic Church is perfect or, this, that, and the other thing, it's not, because we're all human. We're all sinners. We all have faults. And, no school is going to be perfect either. But as I've gone through this journey, what I've learned is that Christ is perfect. The truth is perfect. God led me in little tidbits. It wasn't just an overnight, conversion or whatever. It's just been little tidbits of just knowing and trusting and listening to God's voice, and just not be afraid, but just to trust in Him.
Katie, you are the director of advancement at Bishop Dwenger. And so I think I'm going to go out on a limb here and say you obviously are a Catholic as well. Did you grow up in a Catholic school?
I did not. I've lived here for 38 years and in the same school district in Fort Wayne for 38 years, and I went through the public schools there. At that time, Catholic school really wasn't on our radar as far as being able to go there for various reasons. I had a decent experience. I wouldn't say it was a bad experience at all. But things, as you know,
Things have changed.
It's been a bit. It's been a bit.
So then what would you say then, because you work in Bishop Dwenger and you are a Catholic.
Yes.
What are some of the stereotypes that you see people coming in with? Maybe they book a tour with you or what have you. What stereotypes do you feel like are really prevalent?
Oh my goodness.
Well, yeah, where to start, right? I think my number one stereotype about Catholic schools in general, and I shouldn't even say Catholic, I should just say private schools, it's just the cost, that they are way out of reach for me financially.
That's not true. We have robust scholarship programs, and no, it's not if you come here and play football, you get money. We don't have athletic scholarships. That's not how that rolls. If you want to talk myths, let's just get that one off the plate right away. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. They're all need-based, and we're very blessed to have a lot of people who leave us in their will, and that kind of experience has mattered to them. They've seen their children and grandchildren go through this, and maybe it was something that they could never have when they were little, and that's a gift that they want to give somebody else. So first and foremost, we've been blessed with that. We have an incredibly generous community. Secondly, as you know, the school choice program has been instrumental in opening so many doors and breaking down barriers, leveling that playing field for children who would otherwise not be able to benefit from something like a Catholic school, a Lutheran school, any type of private institution. And as we all know, children learn differently. And if that school is best for them, then their money should follow them there. And this allowed for that kind of an opportunity for those kids.
If someone is hesitant to even pursue the direction of a Catholic school, because I think the other the other stereotype, or at least that I hear people say in my circles, and I'll be honest, I mean, I say it all the time in this podcast, I'm a Christian, and yet I'm pursuing all forms of education for my child. She's 3. I'm saying nothing is off the table, but with some friends who are kind of like-minded like me, and we bring up the topic of, a Catholic school, because I'm not the only one going through this exploration, but we've all always kind of wondered, I mean, I've always wondered this myself, just in general, do you have to be a Catholic to attend Catholic school?
We absolutely don't force students to become Catholic, and we don't reject students because they're not Catholic. That's absolutely inaccurate. But let's just clear up another misconception as well. A lot of people who don't really know anything about Catholicism often don't think that we're Christian, and I'm sure you're going to get an email or two on this one, but Catholics are Christian.
You want to email her at Bishop Dwenger?
Yeah, please, no. Thanks. So Catholics are Christian, and we absolutely welcome all walks of faith. We have students who might not have any faith at all, who come to us not really knowing anything about it. And those doors are open for them, but they're never forced to walk through them. They do participate in theology classes, and they come to Mass, but they aren't required to receive communion or to go through the sacraments in any way. It is available to every single student, but it is not forced on any single one of them.
That's really cool. What about, I know from a lot of the Lutheran schools that I've been looking into, there's all this talk too, if you attend Lutheran church, don't quote me off this, it's, 2 Sundays out of the month, you get quote a discount. Is there something like that goes on within Bishop Dwenger? Or?
Yes, there is an active parishioner rate. So if you're considered an active parishioner, and that's subjective to the church, I believe, don't quote me on that, but there is an active parishioner rate that is a little bit discounted because you're active there. You're giving of your time and your talent and your treasure to a certain parish, and they see that as a value-added item. So they want to make your journey through Catholic education as easy as possible.
Something that I think is just really great while we're having this conversation, and it's something actually, Shelley, that I'm going to harken back to. It's something that you said, and it really stuck with me. The 3 of us were having lunch. I want to preface that. I mean, we've all chit-chatted before prior to this podcast. But you said, it's so beautiful, Catholics and Christians coming together again for that one common good that, again, we all want what's best for our kids.
Absolutely.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say, really preserving the innocence of childhood and growing up and preserving a true education, if you will. But just to your point, Katie, Catholics being Christians and Christians can be Catholics or what have you. I think that really is a beautiful thing, Shelley, that you said.
And it's synonym, right? It's the same word. If you go back in history and time, I mean, Catholic and Christian, it's interchangeable. It's the same word. We worship the same God, and throughout, my husband and I started dating when we were very young, like 8th grade, freshman year in high school. So I can remember even in the 8th grade, and I grew up in a church that, I went to Sunday school and I was told that Catholics were not Christian. It was a cult. But anyways, I remember sitting and talking to my husband, and I'm just like, well, it's kind of a cult, or, and we started talking about what do we believe? And we believe the same thing, right? There's always the thing of Mary, that always gets the Protestants, but we don't worship Mary. We ask for her intercessions. It's no different than me going to Katie or to you and saying, can you pray for me to the Lord our God? And that's always the biggest hiccup. But even starting in 8th grade, my husband and I are like, we believe the same thing. And that's when God started opening doors for me and on my journey and stuff. And even when we got married, the minister at my church, we went through marriage prep with him. We went through marriage prep with Father Tim down at St. Bernard's. And, it's this, we were talking about the same things, and then both priest and minister wanted to be involved in our wedding. John grew up Catholic.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
I was close to my minister. So tradition, you get married in the bride's church. Well, the elders in the church at that time, the church that I was going to, said, no, priests can't come to be part of the service. And I was like, wait a minute. I thought it was Catholics that were always the ones that said no, and it was the opposite. And that's what I've learned throughout my whole journey, is that I think us as Catholics kind of tend to sit back and just be like, we don't want to push anything on anybody, but the door is always welcoming. That's what I've learned throughout my whole process with Catholic schools and becoming Catholics, that the door is wide open.
How do you feel like the Catholic education that your kids, because your kids are older, how old are your kids? Just we're all on the same age.
I'm at 23, 22, and 18.
All out of high school at this point.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, or how did their Catholic education shape them as they went into college? And I know your 23-year-old is engaged, I believe, right? Can we share that as engaged? Relationships and just. Did you see similar issues, with your kids that your neighbors were dealing with their children receiving other forms of education?
Yeah, and I think it's been more towards kids outside of Fort Wayne, even, friends in Chicago, just them having to deal with a lot more issues, come to say. And they sent their kids to public school, not Catholic school. But then I have kids that, friends that sent their kids to Catholic school in the Chicago area, and there's just this grounding aspect. I just feel like my kids, when they went to college, they were kind of grounded and rooted in, it's not all about me. I think Catholic schools really does teach through service hours and things in our sports programs that it's not all about you. It's about service to others.
I have to jump in on that one real quick, if you don't mind. Just as an employee there, I haven't been there long, just starting my third year. One of the best things that I am able to do with a student is to pray with them, to nurture their spiritual need, and to even discuss this side of it. If I see a student in the hall having a bad day, they're high schoolers, we're all emotional, right? Start of a new school year, can't get the locker, whatever it is. There have been kids I've encountered in the hallway in tears, and I said, you know what, come with me. And we just go and we sit in the chapel. You don't even have to talk to me. You don't have to do anything. Let's just sit together. Here's a tissue, and then we'll pray together. I can't tell you how many times I've been blessed to do that. And I just love the fact that I get to do it, because we're not ignoring that spiritual aspect of who we are as people. We all have a spirit. We all have a soul. And education is a beautiful thing. But being able to educate this entire child and to fulfill those basic needs for them and really communicate on that other level that's so important, that makes it other-centered.
Yeah.
I think that's where so much growth happens. And there's that safety net there for those kids that they might not otherwise have.
Yeah. That's so true. I never thought of that either. The fact that you're able to even really truly nurture that. Because, and again, I'm not saying public schooling is a bad thing. That's very well maybe the route we go with my child. But, in a public school, it's not like you're able to go take a student off to the side and pray with them. I mean, that would be a no-no. You have that ability. Teachers, administrators, friends have that ability to kind of nurture that spiritual growth in a much deeper way.
It provides excellent connections as well. The kids that, like I said, I'm only in my third year there, but there's kids that have graduated and come back already. And I love the big hugs. I love the how are you doing? And I love that they make it a point to come back. It's coming home for them. And I love that. And I know kids do that in so many different schools. And I, like Shelley, am a product of public school. I like to think I'm okay. It turned out all right. I don't know. That's what I keep trying to tell people. But
I'll let you know after this podcast what I really think.
I appreciate it. And I had wonderful teachers that I still love to run into today. But back then, we got to do some extra off-campus things. And the ones that I connected with then were on a different level. It was a little bit more of a spiritual level. They were advisors for things like Youth for Christ or something like that. And I knew it. And I knew they were a safe space for me. And those were the ones that I still would come back to, even in my mind today, thinking I grew most with them.
You mentioned, Shelley, service programs. And I love that what you said, too, that it's not just about me. This about me mentality, which I could go on and on for days about that, but I won't include you two in that. But Katie, talk to me then. What are these service programs, for example, then at a Bishop Dwenger?
Well, every student is required to complete a certain amount of service hours, and there's different types of service hours that we offer. There's flex hours, and then there's specific hours that we have partnerships with different area charities with. That is part of, I know we talked about indoctrination, things like that, but a lot of them aren't even necessarily faith-based organizations. We have great partnerships with places like the Ewell Wilson Center. We love the Ewell Wilson Center. No, it's not a church, but it is nurturing through Christ's love. It's not a Catholic organization.
That is so cool. I didn't even know y'all did that.
Yes, we send a bus there. It's every week. It's great. We've done that for years. Gigi's Playhouse, not a faith-based organization, but we work with them all the time. We love having the Gigi's ambassadors come to Bishop Dwenger. We have them perform sometimes at games, and you can see the spirit in the room lift just through their performance, through their joy. We love working with those kids, those adults as well. And those kinds of things force our kids to look outside of themselves. And whatever problems they're having in their life at that time, they're recognizing they can still help somebody else.
Yeah.
And self-care is important, but self-centered focus is often the ugly head of that. If we focus too much on self-care, we don't want to get down to that point where it just becomes about us, right? Sometimes self-care is serving others.
Girl, you're preaching my language. I said I wouldn't get into it, but I wouldn't do that to you.
Here we are.
But it's true. In today's day and age, at least with a lot of young people, it seems there is such a me mentality. And I hate that lie. I think it's such a disservice to young kids that it's all about you. Do whatever makes you feel good.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yes. That is so unrealistic. There are times you're going to be unhappy. You're going to be sad. You're going to be mad. You're going to be frustrated. What planet are we living on to tell kids just do whatever makes you feel good and be happy? I agree with you. I know Gigi's Playhouse. I have seen some of those performances that you're talking about with the bells and the clapping and the singing and the things. I mean, that just warms your heart. And like you said, it makes you see outside of yourself. Right. I do want to get into the nitty gritty of the Indiana School Choice Voucher program.
Yes.
I don't know about you guys. I think it's complicated. I think it can be political, although I don't feel like it should be political. But Katie, you're the one kind of in the thick of it. How does the school choice voucher program, which by the way has been expanded in the state of Indiana rather recently, exponentially. I believe back in 2011 when we first had our school voucher, it covered households with an income of about $45,000. It's now is just expanded to household incomes of $220,000. So I know there's a lot of talk about them being used for private versus public, but before we get into kind of all of that, how does it work for Bishop Dwenger?
So it works the same way it works for anybody else throughout the state. It's a state law program, so it's from school to school. It's consistent. So what happens essentially is your tax dollars, Kayla, are not paying for my child to go to school. They didn't pay for Shelley's kids to go to school or anybody else's. Your tax dollars follow your own child. That's really the essence of how this works. So depending on what school district you actually live in, you have a certain amount of money that can be applied towards your child's tuition. It's that complicated.
Why does it seem like it's become so complicated?
Because it's been politicized.
Yeah.
Just like anything that starts off very noble, it gets the wrong people's claws in it. It gets the wrong people talking about it, and different monies behind it and different lobbies, and all of a sudden you have yourself a political storm.
There is, I suppose, on the surface, one could make the argument of the separation of church and state, right? I suppose you could make that argument that school voucher dollars shouldn't be used for a, quote, private education. However, I, on the flip side, think, well, again, like you just said, shouldn't my taxpayer dollars, shouldn't I have the choice of where my child and how those dollars are spent for my child's education? To me, that's why it simply should be a bipartisan thing. We should all be able to choose the kind of education our kids receive.
It did start as a bipartisan effort back in 1990, and I'll get to that in a moment. However, let's talk about the tax dollar portion of this and what this actually looks like. So Indiana enacted this as law in 2011. In 2013-2014, the USCCB did a study because they just wanted to know what this was actually doing to our community and what things looked like. Even a couple years after it was enacted in Indiana and some other states, we now have 32 states that have school choice. I can't speak to what it was at that time. I don't have that statistic in front of me. But when this study was done, it still saved, the existence of private schools still saved taxpayers $21 billion a year because they're still getting the tax money for kids that they weren't even educating.
That was just back in, what do you know the numbers today? Is that still the same case?
I believe it's done every few years or so, but it might be every 10 years. So a new one should be coming out here
That's
soon.
staggering.
It's staggering.
And we don't ever hear that part of it.
No, but think about it for a second. You know, you look at, I recently saw Carroll is almost at capacity. Yeah. Imagine then if Bishop Dwenger didn't exist, if Concordia Lutheran didn't exist, where would those kids go? Not all of them would be homeschooled. A lot of them would go to Carroll. Yeah. A lot of them would go to some of these schools that are busting at the seams. You know, I live near Homestead, and I was super excited at first because it looked like they were building an IKEA onto the side of it. It's not an IKEA. It's just more school. So I'm driving past this, and obviously they're not hurting for kids, right? So let's say Lourdes didn't exist. Let's say Dwenger didn't exist. All those kids have to go somewhere. If Canterbury didn't exist, where would they go? A lot of them would go to Homestead. And so how do you pay for that? How do those tax dollars then come through and educate those kids. That's more busing, more teachers, more facilities.
And they got my money.
Yeah.
I mean, I paid for both. I feel like I do. I paid my taxes, and, the income balance wasn't what it was that we never got any voucher at all. I feel like we double paid, So yeah, I mean, the public schools I'm not sending my kids to public school, but I'm still paying the taxes
Right.
for public school.
You're right. You're almost paid double because your kids,
Yeah.
you wouldn't have had the voucher program.
Exactly.
And essentially, if you did, your money is following your kids. It's not
Correct.
anyone else's money. It's your credit. And that's why it's broken down the way it is. And, you look at it, and how often do you really get to speak with your tax dollars? How often do you ever get to say, I want my tax dollars to go to something that matters to me, and this is where I want them to go? We don't get that opportunity very much. So let's take the ones we've got.
And I honestly believe competition is great, right? I think it makes
Absolutely.
everybody better. Us at Catholic schools, we have to compete in order to get kids to want to come to Catholic school. And
Well, like we were talking before, finding common ground, and
yeah.
public school's not the enemy here.
they're
Private school's not the enemy
They're
here.
not the enemy, but at the same time, public schools, I think, should be held a little bit accountable.
Oh, I couldn't agree with
Right?
more with that statement. But to your point, Katie, it shouldn't be a us versus them mentality or vice versa, right? It shouldn't be
Exactly.
public versus private. However, and I can't speak for all the other states that have school choice, it does seem like with this recent expansion of the voucher program, at least here in Northeast Indiana, it does feel like it's kind of become an us versus them mentality. And I'm hoping you can explain to us today why that is, because all of a sudden it does kind of feel like public schools are attacking private schools, not just Catholic schools, but just private schools in general. Of, oh, geez, we've expanded and now everyone's going to private school. I'm kind of with you, Shelley, and well, sorry, we just bred a little competition here.
Yeah.
And we're trying to attract students and families to what's best for them. But why is that, Katie? Do we know why that is?
Well, I just think you take a look at the headlines. And there was a recent headline in Fort Wayne. It was very unfortunate, in fact, that we are under attack was the quote from a local superintendent. Well, first of all, putting attack in a headline about schools is distasteful to say the least. But let's bring it back also to who's really under attack here, because a follow-up article was a $170 million expansion. So your $170 million tells me otherwise.
And I think it's our kids are honestly under attack. That's who's under attack. We have outside influences. Our kids are getting bombarded through social media and everything every second of every day. And, kids being able to wear furries to school and things like that. And we're dealing with feelings a lot of times instead of reality. And that's where I think the service aspect of Catholic schools, you get outside of yourself. I think the one best way, I forget which saint or priest said it, the best way to lift yourself up is to help somebody else.
Amen. I just heard the best quote. Colonel Greg Gatson, he served in the Army. He's a Purple Heart recipient. Had both of his legs blown off in a convoy, but he said the exact same thing to that effect, Shelley. He said, if you are blessing people, you are blessed, which is, I think, pretty much what you're saying. And
Exactly.
what a lost concept in today's day and age.
It is. And honestly, the public school that I grew up in, we had teachers that were Christian and coaches that were Christian, and we would pray together. And it's just this moral base that you just didn't veer outside of. And I feel like the lane has just been widened for these kids. And it's just like, you need guardrails.
Yeah.
Especially when you're young and being influenced. Guardrails are a good thing.
Boundaries and expectations. So important.
expectations.
I do think, though, when we're talking about the attacks and everything, what we always seem to lose sight of when something gets politicized is that we struggle then to find common ground. And what I would really prefer people to see, whether you are a public school educator, a private school educator, a parent, whatever you are, we are all in this together. What is our objective? We want to better these kids. If that's not our objective, we should not be in this business. That should absolutely be our objective, number one. Number two, the question is, how do we get there? And if we get there because some kid who can't otherwise afford a smaller school or specialized attention in a certain area, if they can get this kind of service, whether it's a Lutheran school, whether it's if we had a Jewish school in town, whatever it is.
Yeah, why should it matter?
It shouldn't matter.
Yeah.
It shouldn't matter at all. If there's no faith attached to the school, they should be able to have those opportunities.
What about Katie and Shelley? Maybe you saw this with some of your kids. I realize they're a little bit older, and I don't know. I do think there's also this, I don't know if it's a myth or not, because I don't know, but this idea that some of the stuff that does go on in public schools, whether it be talks about identities or certain talk about furries or whatever it might be, does stuff like that happen in private schools?
I can't speak to every school. I haven't seen that. I think our great blessing is uniforms, to be very honest.
Oh, amen to that, sister.
As a mom and as an administrator, I am thrilled
cuts a lot of that out.
It cuts out all those things. I remember crying in Kohl's with my mom in high school because I couldn't wear the same things that I wanted to wear. She didn't want me to wear it. It cuts out all those problems. And the argument a lot of people make, and we've talked about this before, but the argument people make is, well, what about their individuality? They can't showcase their individuality. Well, God forbid we just look at their personality instead.
Right.
You know, this gives an opportunity to showcase a personality rather than a label or a style. This is who are you? I see kids that would never have been friends otherwise, that because they don't dress alike or anything like that, they see the value in one another and they're dear friends.
Yeah, and I mean, I went to a public school growing up too. We did not have uniforms, but I'm a big fan of them, aside from feeling like I have nothing to wear when you have a closet full of clothes to wear. But aside from that, in all honesty, growing up, it broke my heart. It still to this day breaks my heart when you've got little Jimmy being picked on because he doesn't have the latest and greatest sneakers. So I go back to, I actually think it's a disservice for kids who don't have uniforms. For that very reason.
I mean, it's such a blessing in so many ways. So many ways.
I have a freshman daughter this year, and I'm like, here you go. Here's your polo. Go crazy.
Exactly. And selfishly, as a parent, I loved it.
Oh, I think it would be a dream as a parent. Again, my child's 3. Haven't had to really embark on that territory yet because she lets us just dress her in the morning with whatever outfit I lay out.
And kids have opportunities to wear, outfits to football games and stuff like that. It's not like our kids walk or march around in uniforms.
You're there to be educated. It's not a fashion show. I don't know. I still maintain that. Same with that work. I mean, we have a policy here, like we can't wear flip-flops, for example. And I remember when they launched that policy at FedMed a couple of years ago, everyone threw a fit. And I'm like, does that really impact your work and your ability to perform in this business if you can't wear flip-flops? No, that's ridiculous. Just don't wear your flip-flops to work. I don't know. To me, it's like lost on me why it's such a big deal. Really quick, I want to go back to the school vouchers because I want people to know if they want to apply for them, because again, they've been, if you haven't heard, wildly expanded in the state of Indiana. You can go on to the Indiana Department of Education's website. Any questions you might have, how to apply, if your school takes vouchers, whatnot, it's all right there online. So I want people to know that. But how much does it cost for tuition without a voucher at Bishop Dwenger?
Without a voucher, it's roughly $10,000
a year. Okay. But with a school voucher potentially, which covers quite a large percentage, I believe, also of private education, we're talking that gets cut by 50, 60, 70%, right?
Correct. Yes. Depending on the district you live in, that application would go through and take care of a majority of your tuition. We then have the SGO that you can apply for, which the minimum award for an SGO is $500.
What's an SGO?
It's the Scholarship Granting Organization. The SGO helps bridge that gap. And then we also have additional scholarships. Most private schools have additional scholarships that you can apply to that are largely need-based.
See, I really want people to hear this, because going back to Shelley, from you and I talking 6 months ago, which again is how I met Katie to begin with, through you, it just opened my eyes to, oh my gosh, I have other options.
You do.
Beside the school in my backyard.
I think that was our main goal for doing this. Just to let people know they have other options.
Whether it be a Lutheran school, a Catholic school, a Christian school, homeschooling, that's kind of a separate, kind of different conversation. Go back to my previous podcast for that one. But I think when it comes to education, finances, it's always a huge topic. Location, obviously, that's a factor as well. But I feel like, at least here in the state of Indiana, our state legislature doing it right with this new ruling, they've kind of taken finances off the table to some degree. And I'm not saying for every home, but I believe it's like 97% of the folks in the state of Indiana, it's now opened up this brand new world essentially for education to them. And I just think it's so important for not just moms, but any parent to know that these other options are out there.
And that's why it started to begin with. So back in 1990, it was piloted by the Milwaukee public school system. And the big champion of the time for the program was a civil rights leader and the Milwaukee public school superintendent, who is still alive today and still champions for school choice, particularly as a civil rights measure.
I did not know that. So, okay, we kind of touched on this earlier, and you said you were going to get to it, but we didn't. I don't think we got to it then. Why has something that started out as bipartisan, at least here in Indiana, back in 2011, why, where, when, how did it become such a partisan thing?
I think it's just that frog in the pot concept, that the us versus them and a you versus me, and it doesn't have to be that way. I wish it wasn't approached that way. I wish it was approached through the lens of what's best for our children.
Yeah.
And if we can just start that conversation about what is in fact best for my child, what's best for my child might be the school right down the street, whatever it looks like. It could be the public school. It could be homeschooling. My sister-in-law homeschools, and she does an amazing job. I can't do it. I tried for one semester. It was amazing.
Oh, you did? I did not know that.
I did.
Good for you.
I teased when I called the school Our Lady of the Vineyard, because by the afternoon I just wanted to hit the sides.
Our Lady of the Vineyard.
It was rough.
Yeah, at least you're honest about it.
I tried,
and you know.
Well, it was a shot to my ego, because I found out my kids were smarter than I was, so I just had to send them off. I was like, you know what, you're done here.
But I want to harken back to something that I learned from Kristen Bazance. She was the individual I had on during the last podcast talking about homeschooling, because I said these past couple episodes have been very self-serving as I'm exploring these options for my own child. But she said something kind of along those lines, Katie. She said, whatever route you choose, whether that is homeschooling or microschooling, unschooling, there's all these things out there now, you know, private, public education, whatever it might be, you can't just send your kid off and count on the private school, the public school, to educate your child.
Amen to that.
You have to be involved in their education. You can't just rely on
This is a partnership.
Yeah,
your school should be an
exactly.
extension of who you are as a parent. Who knows your child better than you? Who knows what they need better than you, and how to support them and nurture them better than you? So it is an absolute partnership. All you parents out there, get involved in your kids' school if you're not already. Don't get involved in like a nasty way, but you know, get involved in an encouraging way.
And each kid is different too. My brother has homeschooled 2 kids, but their 3rd child they've sent off to school, because of her personality and who uniquely she is. So she needs to be in a classroom setting and in an environment. I know one of my best friends, they had sent 1 to Lures, they sent 2 to Homestead, and they sent 1 to Bishop Dwenger. It's just what fits that kid the best.
Bishop Dwenger, just so we're clear, because I'm making sure I have my geography right. You're within the Fort Wayne Community Schools District here in Indiana,
yes.
right? So one more time, if folks wanted to learn more about Bishop Dwenger specifically, because I know you can't speak necessarily to other Catholic schools, how can people find you, get a hold of you? Whether it just be a question or a tour, or I don't know, whatever it might be.
Just call the school, email through their website, email through not email through social media, but contact us through social media. We're everywhere, just quick little Google search and reach out. We would love to give you a tour of our beautiful school, and we have the best staff and faculty, if I do say so myself. We would love that. And I know that that's the case for any of those other schools out there. I know, Concordia's done a great job with their enrollment lately. Black Hawk Christian, they've got a lot of expansion options going on. I just had lunch yesterday with Kristen Spoltman from Bishop Lures, and they are ready to welcome you with open arms. Get in there. Just find out your options. Take all the tours. This is about choice, so make it about choice. Really know what you're actually choosing.
I wish that and I'm not saying all, but I wish other individuals within education kind of had that mentality. Because I truly, from the day I met you, I realized that was your heartbeat. This isn't a Bishop Dwenger thing. You have to go to a Catholic school.
I
that is not your heartbeat.
All of us on a waiting list.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the idea. We are here to serve one another. It goes back to that. We exist to serve. And we don't exist to just serve us. I'm not just here for, yes, I do operate on behalf of Bishop Dwenger, and I am a little biased, but if that's not best for your kid,
as you should be, though, right?
As I should be.
I'm biased to WoWo Radio because I work there, right? I'm not biased. It's the best radio station.
And I would say we are, we're the best school in Fort Wayne. But that's also subjective for you.
Exactly. Yep.
And I have 3 kids that, went through Dwenger, and I can say without a doubt they were very well prepared for college. The college studies, and, one went to Butler. She felt very prepared for the rigorous, she went through the School of Pharmacy and medicine program with that. She's now working for us now, but she felt very, very prepared. And, other daughter went to Oakland up in Detroit. Again, she graduated with honors. So now the third one's off to school, and knock on wood,
they've all been really successful. They really have been.
They have been, and I have to attribute that to Dwenger and Catholic schools, and
you can attribute it to you and John.
Your partnership with them as well.
Yes. And but also the Catholic schools made it welcoming for us to be visible there. We had an opportunity, to be visible and present with our kids at school.
It's a family affair.
It is. I think I told the story when we were at lunch when our son finished up his senior year of football, and you go into the chapel and you have one last mass through the football program, and the boys are in there and they're singing at the top of their lungs. Just all these young men. I mean, you sit in the back of that chapel with goosebumps as a parent and just feel so blessed that they not only have this brotherhood, and the basketball team did it as well, but us as parents were able to be at that football one, and it was just incredible to see these boys at the end of their career at school and sing at the top of their lungs and not feel ashamed or afraid, and just these young men. It's just, like I said, it just gives you goosebumps.
My husband said something really profound, because we were talking about the Catholic school option just around the dinner table recently. And he said, Kayla, he said, what would you rather? He goes, would you rather our daughter coming home and asking, he said this, and asking about furries, right?
Yeah.
Or would you rather our daughter coming home asking about the 7 sacraments?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, gee, that's a good way to put it. And at the end of the day, I can't rely on whatever school it is to solely educate our child, nor should anyone rely on the public school, private school, whatever it might be, to solely educate their children. On that note, really quick, Katie, too, is there a difference, or what is the difference between how you get your funding and how a public school gets funding? Did you not want me to ask that question?
That is my whole job, Kayla. That's why my job exists. So, as you know, tuition only covers part of it.
Right.
It costs more to actually educate a child than tuition can take care of. So that's where I step in. I do all the fundraising there. I do all the events there. We run Saints Alive, which we're super proud of. It's a wonderful, incredible, uplifting night. I have my little staff back there, my hardworking group of ladies who serve and sacrifice and make things happen for our students. And it's because of incredible donors, incredible gifts, and a lot of hard work. I don't get to pass a referendum and see cash rain from the sky and then put in a $170 million expansion. We claw for everything we've got. And we're getting ready to make some updates to our stadium, which we're really excited about, that hopefully do some really good things for us. We had a local businessman who sent his kids through Bishop Dwenger and said, hey, what do you need to generate some more revenue for athletics? Because believe it or not, even though we're a top 10 athletics school, we're in the red every year because it is so expensive and we don't get any of that funding whatsoever. So we're trying really hard to bring in some additional funding for our athletics program. So he's made some adjustments to our stadium, fully funded some of these operatives for us so I can start getting some more ad revenue in. And it's just people who believe in our mission, who believe in what the school has done for their children, and have decided to continue that spirit of sacrificial giving, whether it's a lot of money, whether it's a little time, whatever it is. We have grandmas that come back and stuff envelopes and invitations for us, and we drink coffee and eat pastries together and talk and pray, and it is this beautiful family community atmosphere. So while it is a little bit of a double-edged sword, we don't just get that cash. We get so much more. Mm-hmm. We get this community that we wouldn't otherwise have if it was just strictly publicly funded.
And if that's not an endorsement, I don't know what is. Like a local businessman saying, coming back, hey, what do you need, Katie?
Yes.
What do you need? How can I support you and service the school? I mean, it doesn't really get any better than that. Are there any events that we need to be aware of coming up?
We are so excited to be celebrating our 60th anniversary this year.
Wow.
So keep checking our website because we are adding things all the time. We're bringing back Powder Puff to the
Love it.
the groans of the staff. No, they were making them
what
all
this
sign
is.
a contract that they're going to behave themselves, and they will because they're great kids. But we're bringing back a whole bunch of fun things. We want to bring back the bonfire. We're going to try really hard to get clearance to do that. Our homecoming against Homestead is going to be just a party, and I encourage the Homestead community to come out. We're gonna have food trucks. We welcome you.
I
as
love that.
family.
That's great. You're inviting the Homestead community to it, too.
I want you to come.
Yeah.
Please.
It's a lot of our friends.
Come celebrate with us. We live there. I know. It's my neighbors. Please
Exactly.
come. So we want you to come and celebrate alongside us and come see what we have to offer. If things aren't working out for you where you are, come see what we have to offer. And if you're going to accept or reject something, accept it or reject it based on what it really is and not what other preconceptions are.
I think that's the main part of the story here. Catholics, Christians, non-Catholics, non-Christians coming together, joining forces again for the betterment.
People
of
for
our
our
kids.
kids.
Yeah, people
Yes.
for our kids. So that's a good note to end on. Katie, Shelley, I appreciate you both coming in studio.
Thank you
Thanks
for your
for
time.
having us.
When it comes to my takeaways, and I've got a couple of them for this episode, these are not reflective of Katie or Shelley. These are my takeaways. I have to throw that disclaimer out there these days. But I think the big one really, I mean, aside from the fact that you have options when it comes to the education of your child, it's really what we've been hammering on. It seems like through this whole episode, you know, a lot of times people these days, especially our young people, have this false mentality of me, 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 me. It's all about self-love. It's all about self-empowerment, doing whatever makes us feel good on the inside. When I mean, just take a quick glance at the good book here in 2 Timothy 3. It says in the end times, people will be lovers of self. And we're not talking in a good way here. Take a listen. It says, but understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty, for people will be lovers of self. Lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving good. And yet we spend so much time, we're so self-absorbed. We try to prove to ourselves that we are enough. We spend so much time trying to convince ourselves of this lie, and it drains us. It's exhausting. It makes us cranky. It makes us hate ourselves. But when I heard Katie and Shelley both talk about Bishop Dwenger just being driven by this mentality of what I can do for you, that about stopped me dead in my tracks. Because we're not enough, and that's okay. Christ is our sufficiency. I love Allie Beth Stuckley, if you know who she is. She's got great podcasts out there on this. But that's what she always says, and her message has always stuck with me. Christ is our sufficiency. If we were enough, we wouldn't need our Lord and Savior, right? Because we are insufficient. And trying to pretend that we're anything else, like I said, it's just exhausting. It's going to lead to depression, anxiety, self-loathing, suicide. It is not all about me. And when it comes to these service programs, for example, at Bishop Dwenger, I mean, what a concept. I actually want to apply this other big takeaway that I did mention that I heard from the last episode's guest, Katie Bezantz, on homeschooling. And I just want to reiterate this one that she said, you know, no matter where your child is getting an education, at home, online, in a public setting or private setting, you know, it really doesn't matter. You should not be relying solely on that, quote, schooling to educate your child. Yes, it's a partnership. I love the way that Katie put it in this episode. It is a partnership. To me, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's even so much more than that when it comes at least to the education of your child. I'm a food person, so I kind of view it like this. You know, you educating your child, that's got to be the meat of the meal, right? It's got to be a thick, big, juicy cut of prime rib. You educating your child. The rest, what they learn in whatever form of schooling they're receiving, so whatever they learn in school, that's just a side dish. That's the potatoes or the asparagus. But even though it's a side dish, it's still vitally important. You still don't want your kids eating Skittles with their prime rib. You still want those side dishes to be nourishing, to work well with the prime rib, to pair well with the prime rib. No one knows your child better than you. No one knows how to feed your child spiritually, mentally, emotionally better than you. In today's day and age, I truly believe deep down in my gut that at the very least, my own child needs to be getting a faith-based education. And at the very least, all of our children should be on a faith-based waiting list. Don't forget, the Indiana Choice Scholarship Program applications are actually still open. They are open for the state of Indiana through September 1st, 2023. If you are not from Indiana, I highly encourage you. About half the states in the country right now have these scholarship voucher programs. I would encourage you to seek out yours, seek out what your state is actively doing to try and expand education options for our kids. This is it, guys. If you have been enjoying the News Mom podcast, sadly, this is the last episode of this season, but not to worry. I'll be back in the fall with more News Mom content for you. If you've missed previous episodes, you can download the News Mom podcast anywhere you download a podcast. Click, subscribe, like, give me a 5-star rating. That's the best thing you can do for me. I will be back, like I said, in the fall. And so if you subscribe to this News Mom podcast right now, you will be alerted the very second I return in the fall for season 2. I already have so many moms lined up for season 2. We're going to continue our education theme. Yes, we're also going to dive into fitness moms, construction moms, moms who have children with special needs and how their journeys have been. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So I hope you join me coming up in the fall for season 2 of the News Mom podcast.
She roasts a turkey while roasting lawmakers. This is News Mom.